Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Minecraft tutorial for the Create mod, where today we are going to be taking a look at the wonderful threshold switch. And what is a threshold switch, I hear you say? Well, it is one of these. It is this rather innocent looking little box that you can see here. You'd never guess what it did just by looking at it. It's got an arrow on top to show which direction it is interested in, and it's got this little interface on one side. But other than that, you'd probably never guess what it does. This, though, is perhaps one of the most important components you're going to be using when you start to make more complicated contraptions. That is because it has the power to read an inventory level and then change something that's going on in your farm. It is effectively a way of managing stock levels within your farms. So when we first take a little look at it, we can walk up to it and then right-click it with an empty hand, and that will bring up its little HUD here. This is its interface and how you work with it. You'll notice at the moment it has got nothing on there to indicate the levels or anything that it's actually reading, and that is because there is no chest up against this interface. It needs to have something to read in order to have an output. So if we pop a little chest just there, it will connect up automatically, and now when we go back into the HUD of this little box, we'll see we've gained this little symbol on the side, this little picture of a chest that you can see there. So we can see that on this side of our HUD we've got a chest symbol with an indicator there to say it's rather empty at the moment, and another one on the other side indicating that it is filling up. And we can also see that this is the readout from our current chest, and because it's right over on this side, it's an empty chest, which, because I've just put it down, of course it is. It makes sense then if we put something into this box, for example a whole load of barrels, so that this chest is now 1/3 full. We can see that it's indicated on the side of the switch to show that it is now 1/3 full, and if we actually click through onto the HUD, we can see that the indicator has moved. So our little chest has gone from the end where it was indicating empty to saying, I am now about 1/3 full. And this happens in real time. So if we come over here, we can see that in this chest, oh look, we've got lots of nice iron stored up. I want to have that go into this chest instead, which is currently being read by this threshold switch. So if I just return these and make them go back in the opposite direction so that they can go through, we'll be able to see that this will be ticking up in real time as that chest fills up. What you will notice as well is that as soon as it reaches this arrow just here that is pointing down, this little indicator is going to change, and it is going to go down following that arrow to the lower band. And there he goes. So he's now followed that and he has hopped down onto the lower level. And this is where the switch gets interesting. And that's because this little switch has the ability to output a redstone signal based on where this indicator is. So if it's up here in the darker area, then that's not going to be emitting a signal. But if it goes down into the bright red area, now it will be emitting a redstone signal. So if I go and grab myself some kind of building block, you will do nicely, and then I get some redstone, we should be able to see, if we build out from the back of it, oh yeah, there we go, it is lit up nicely. This is currently outputting a signal. If I then reverse this whole contraption so it goes back again, and we'll just send everything the other way, as it ticks down and it gets underneath this little area here, this chest will go back up into the darker area and it will stop outputting that signal. So we just have a little look, we should see him switch off. There he goes. So he's now not outputting a signal because the chest has gone back up to this area. Now, one thing that you will probably have noticed about this is that as the inventory was filling up and our little chest symbol there was travelling along, it didn't actually switch down to the lower lane until it hit the arrow. If your inventory just sits in this area and it just gets a bit more full, just gets a bit more empty, it will always stay in the same lane. It won't be changing its redstone signal. It only does so when it reaches one of the arrows. So in this case, as the chest fills up, it's not going to change lane and switch on its redstone signal until it reaches 90%, which we can see when we hover over it. It does tell you what it's going to do. It will move to the lower lane at 90%. At which point, if the chest was still filling, it would just fill up to 100% and sit there happily with a redstone signal on. If you then started to empty the chest, the exact same thing happens. So our indicator will move down until it reaches, in this case, 20%. Once that inventory reaches 20%, it's then going to switch back up to the top and switch off its redstone signal. These levels as well can be changed. It's not like they're set at all at 90 and 20. For example, if I only wanted this chest to be 50% full before it then switched its redstone signal on, then I can just move this by scrolling on the mouse wheel. And this goes the same for both of them. They can't cross each other for obvious reasons. If this is the chest filling up, then you can't have the emptying signal more than the chest as it's filling up. It just wouldn't work. So they always have to be in this direction, but you can change either of them. So in this case, what would happen? It's going to fill up till 46% rather randomly. It's then going to switch on its redstone signal until the inventory goes back down below 38% randomly. And it's here that we can start making good use of this switch. And the first of those uses, of course, is switching off farms once you have reached a full inventory. Perhaps one of the most useful things that you can do with these threshold switches. So let's say this is how much inventory I want. I want to have a full chest of something, and then I want this random iron farm to switch off. Well, what we can do is we can set our threshold switch to, let's say, about 90%. That way it's going to fill up but still have a little bit of space left over just in case. And what we can do is we can set it so that once that chest reaches 90%, it's then going to switch on a redstone signal, which we can take over here. And we're going to be able to input that, in this case, just into this funnel. And it'll stop the inventory from coming out of that chest. So if we just switch everything around, and we'll make it go nice and fast for us. And there we go. Everything is filling up. And what we'll find is that once this chest reaches that 90%, the redstone signal switches on. That is then going to stop this funnel from being able to work. And there we go. This inventory is now not leaving the chest. It is effectively switched off. Which is all very well and good, so long as you're just needing to switch on and off funnels. But what if you need to turn off a farm that is a considerable more distance away? Such as, for example, these drills here. Maybe these were what were working our iron farm. Our sort of theoretical iron farm, that is. So what I've done is I've brought the inventory back over here just to represent it. And we can remove all of what we've put here. Because what we can do is we can run a redstone link using the threshold switches as well. If you crouch and then right-click to place it, you won't go into the HUD, and then you can place another one, for example, onto a clutch, which is just coming from some form of power source. So in this case, if I pop it just up there, I'll be able to connect these two up. I'm going to align them to a random birch log. Why not? And then the signal will be able to transmit between the two so that this chest here, this chest's inventory even, is able to turn off that farm all the way over there. You can see just how clever these little switches are. Now at the moment, this redstone link is sending out a signal. I just need to set this one to receive a signal, which you do just by crouching and then right-clicking with an empty hand anywhere on the link itself, and you'll see a little disc has just appeared there around its antenna to say that this is now the receiving signal. And so now if we send our iron back through, there we go, what we'll find is that this redstone link will activate as soon as the 90% threshold is met, and then it'll switch off the drills on the other side. There we go, it's currently filling up. Redstone signal has come on. You can see up there the clutch has also switched on and the drills have stopped. Once again, effectively using the inventory of one chest to switch off a farm. But what if we're not looking to fill an inventory and then switch something off? What if we actually want to conserve an inventory? So for example, let's say this little chest here, I want it to take half of the logs out of this chest. This is a wood farm, let's say. We've got lots of oak logs coming in. We want to keep half of them in this chest and then send the other half off to be processed somewhere else. In that case, we need to do the same thing. We need to be able to change our redstone signal, but we need it to be the other way round. In this case, I want this funnel here to be activated, thus not letting anything through until the inventory in this chest reaches halfway. Luckily again, the good old threshold switch will let us do that. So we know that we want roughly half of our inventory to end up in that chest, so we can set it to 50%. We can set both of these to 50% in fact, and so now as soon as the inventory gets above 50%, it would be activating, and below it would be deactivating. But as we've said, we want that to go the other way around, and luckily we can. Using this little switch down here, we can flip our signal around. And so now, while the inventory is low, as it's filling up to 50%, it will output a redstone signal. We can see it down here flashing away. And then as soon as that inventory gets above 50, it's then going to switch the redstone signal off, and it will allow the logs to just continue on their way through. If it then gets below 50 again, of course it's going to switch the redstone signal back on and make sure 50% stays in that chest. So let's just activate that one and we can see it in action. The way. We put in that way, so what's going to happen is 50% of our logs will end up in that chest, and as soon as it reaches that point we should see the rest just travelling merrily on their way through, off to go and get processed in somewhere else. There we go, so we can see that the redstone has switched off on this side, and then it flashes on whenever the inventory goes underneath 50, but it's all just travelling through, and then by the time this is all emptied, there we go, we should now have half of our logs in there and half of our logs in there. These ones, for example, might go off to become in a charcoal factory or something like that, but we've still got a nice little inventory of fresh oak logs should we need them. All we had to do was use our threshold switch to flip that signal around. But what if we're dealing with a farm that is a little bit more complicated than a mere log farm where we're just sort of splitting things off? Well, if we have a look over here, let's say this is a clay farm. So somewhere we've got sand that's being washed down and it is being broken down into both flint and clay. The clay I want, that's the aim of the game. I want to keep some clay balls behind, and I'd also quite like to make it up into blocks to send off to be terracotta. And the flint, I couldn't care less about it, but I don't want to bin it neither because it's useful later on down the line for making certain types of rocks. So I don't want to get rid of anything, but it's only the clay that I'm really interested in. Well, luckily for us, both the filter and the threshold switch are able to take a filter, so they can be interested in just one or more items. In this case, I only wanted to be interested in the clay balls, so what I will do is I will say, this filter here, I only want you to let the clay out, that way all of the flint will be staying in this chest, and this threshold switch, we can put the clay ball just in the top or on the side of it to say, right, you are only interested in the clay that is in there, not in the flint. And so now, when I set this to say 22%, what it will look at is how much of the chest is filled with the clay. And even if I come over here and I take a load of this flint out, and I stick it all into this chest so that it's going way past that 22%, when I come back and I have a little look at our threshold switch, it hasn't registered it. It really couldn't care less that the flint is in there. Clay is its only interest. Which is great for us because it means that now we can have flint building up, but it's only the clay that's going to go through and it's all that's going to get processed. So if we set this little farm off, what we should find is that as this chest now fills up with the rest of the flint and the clay as it comes through, the clay will build up to the 22% threshold that we're looking for, at which point it will switch off this redstone signal. There we go, we can see it started filling up already. Switch off this redstone signal, that's going to allow the excess clay then to come through and start being stamped up into blocks. So this will retain its 22% clay balls, there will always be clay available to me in here, but the rest is going to get processed through and turned into blocks, which is one, much smaller to store, and two, can be turned into terracotta in another process. There we go. So here comes our clay balls, they're all getting stamped up, and as you can see, plenty will be remaining in that chest. And that is the great thing about threshold switches. They just give you that little bit more control over the stock that you've got, just so that you know exactly what you're doing, where it's going, and meaning you don't need such long, complicated redstone chains or anything. You can just have one nice little block that does the whole job for you. Anywho though, I hope you've enjoyed this little tutorial where we've taken a look at the threshold switch. Happy Minecrafting everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!